Good evening and welcome to the Village Green Drive Corridor Revitalization Project Public Information Meeting. Today is Thursday, October the 8th at 6 p.m. and we are going to get started. I am Jennifer Davis. I'm your CRA Project Manager. To my left, we have Christina Furman with Marlin Engineering. And to my right, we have Heath Stockton with the City Public Works Department. And at the end of the dais, we have Dawn Sorrow with Cutler and Herring. Just below Dawn, we do have Melissa Zola, who is with Firefly. This evening's presentation format is Zoom. Microphones will be muted during the presentation. Please use the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen to ask any questions or provide comments. We have staff monitoring that feature and we'll be addressing comments throughout the meeting, as well as at the end we will have a question and answer session. At this time, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Christina Furman to get started.
Thank you, Jennifer. And thank you all for attending tonight's meeting. This is the agenda for this evening's presentation. We're looking at a project overview, a review of the community assets, physical conditions, corridor opportunities, and next steps. And we will save all the questions and comments for the end of the presentation. Just to give you an illustration of the process of a transportation project, we're at the beginning stages of planning, and this is where we review existing conditions, get citizen feedback, and come up with some conceptual designs. Once we complete our process, which is approximately 1 year, it'll move over to the PD&E and design phase. Some projects this is combined, other projects it's separated. I believe the city is looking for a combined PD&E and design phase process, where it will look at impacts, identify or review the conceptual designs that we propose here in our planning process, and vet those designs, and then it'll go through engineering drawings. From there, if there's right-of-way to be purchased, this is where some projects can get stalled, and in some cases can take years to attain. We don't anticipate any right-of-way purchasing in this phase, though that will be looked at more closely in the next phase of this process. And then it'll go to construction. So anywhere from 5+ years for this project to potentially get built. So an overview, Village Green Drive is a corridor that's approximately 2 miles, connects from Crosstown Parkway down to Southeast Tiffany Avenue, connecting to the St. Lucie Medical Center. US 1 to Walton, you're looking at mostly industrial residential uses. And then this is the Hogpen Slough area where you can see that green line running through. And then from Walton to Southeast Tiffany, you have a mix of residential, medical, commercial. This is where City Center is, and recreational opportunities. So we're coming to our first poll.
Yes. Our first poll is, how do you use Village Green Drive? You can select all that apply: vehicle, walk, bicycle, transit, or other. Okay, the poll is now closed. And we're going to share the results. It looked like 100% use vehicle, 57% walk, 43% bicycle.
Great, thank you for that information. So going on an overview of the project tasks, Our project is separated into 4 separate tasks. We have task 1, which will be ongoing throughout the process, where we have meetings, coordination, and public involvement. Last month, we held a business canvassing event where we went door to door to the businesses along the drive, informed them of our project, and let them know about tonight's meeting. And then in February, we'll be coming back to you for our second public meeting. More details about that later. Task 2 is our data collection and analysis phase, and this is where we review documents, plans, codes that are already existing. We've already conducted a field inventory, site visit, recently collected some traffic, pedestrian, and bicycle data, which we're in the process of reviewing, vetting, and analyzing. And last week, we held a walking audit with our project partners. More on that in a little bit. Once we wrap up this phase in the next few weeks, we'll be moving on to our conceptual design phase. And that's where we'll take the data we've collected, the plans and everything we've reviewed, and take your input from tonight and start coming up with alternative design for the corridor. And then we'll come back to you so that you can review these alternative designs, provide us with comments and feedback, and then also vote on your preferred alternative. From that meeting, we'll take your comments. From there, we'll do some last-minute revisions and present to the City Council a final design alternative. So this is just to give you a visual of the project schedule. As you can see here, Task 1 will be ongoing throughout the process. Task 2 will be wrapping up in the next few weeks. You can see here, we anticipate Task 3, the conceptual design phase, to begin sometime in November. And then Task 4, which is the final master plan, will begin sometime in March once we meet in February. So moving on to community assets, we've got our next poll here.
Poll number 2, what is your greatest community asset? You can only choose one this time. The neighborhoods, the businesses, the medical complex, city center, parks, trails, natural areas, the water, or other. About 5 more seconds to take the poll. Okay, we're going to close it out. And looks like the city center by 33% is what you think your greatest community asset is, with neighborhoods and the medical complex coming in at 22%, and the businesses and parks and trails both at 11% as well. And we'll close that one out.
Great, thank you. So jumping into the neighborhoods, which we saw 22% agreed that the neighborhoods are a great community asset. Village Green Drive is situated in the Sand Hill Crossing neighborhood. And then we've got 5 communities adjacent to Village Green Drive: Spanish Lakes, Harbor Pine, Harbor Palm, Rainier Lakes, and the Midport Place condominiums. The local and regional destinations. Village Green Drive is home to the Mid-Florida Event Center, also known as City Center, the St. Lucie Medical Complex, the Annex Center, the Industrial Park, the Savannah's Preserve State Park, and Woodstork Trail. In terms of multimodal access, Village Green Drive has pedestrian facilities such as sidewalks and crosswalks. There's transit available along the drive. We've seen bicyclists utilizing the sidewalk and the roadway, as well as the nearby shared use pathways, and of course vehicular traffic as well. We know from reviewing the various plans and studies that have been conducted in the area that community engagement is a strong component. The community has participated in the various studies performed throughout the area, planning studies, roadway projects, community redevelopment projects, including the Crosstown Parkway. As I mentioned previously, we've engaged with the business community and stakeholders throughout the area, visiting the different sites, informing them of the project and tonight's meeting. And then last week, we held a walking audit. I've mentioned this earlier. The walking audit, we had just over 25 participants, and it included mostly our project partners from county, city, and school board staff, as well as our consultant team. Walking audits are a great way to walk the corridor and assess the area's walkability by observing how drivers and pedestrians use the street. This is important because walkable communities promote health, foster a sense of connection and community among residents, and provide an overall sense of place and belonging that help make a neighborhood livable for people of all ages and life stages. So last week we had 2 groups split into 2 different areas and walk for about 45 minutes. Once we completed the walk, we came back to the event center where we solicited everybody's feedback, had them take a survey. It was really a great experience to walk the corridor. You get to feel it and see it, how the pedestrians, how the vehicles, how the bicyclists are using the existing infrastructure. So in terms of the feedback that was given, we provided a word cloud here. We thought this would best illustrate the comments that we received. As you can see from the word cloud, sidewalks was a comment that was often given related to either wider sidewalks or missing links, followed by ADA access or compliance, trees, shade, benches, lighting, trash receptacles, recycling bins, dog bags, crosswalks, and the like. So moving on, we're going to talk about the physical conditions of the corridor, but first we've got our next poll for you.
Poll number 3, do you live or work within the half-mile radius of Village Green Drive? Yes or no? Poll number 3, do you live or work within a half-mile radius of Village Green Drive? Yes or no? Okay, the poll is closing. And it looks like 75% do and 25% do not. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So we can see that many of you live within the Village Green Drive corridor, within the radius. So it's great to know. So we're going to move on to traffic conditions. So as I explained earlier, we have collected some preliminary data along the drive. And these are the raw data collected over a 72-hour period, which illustrates average daily traffic along Village Green Drive. So you can see here the LD, which stands for lane divided. Most of the traffic along the drive is north of Walton Road. So the average daily traffic along that portion of the roadway is approximately 10 to almost 13,000 vehicles a day. And then that next column, the last column there, is the maximum average daily traffic that allows for that corridor. And then south of Walton Road, significantly less traffic at about 4,000 vehicles a day. And that's, that portion of the roadway is 2-lane, one travel lane in each direction. We've also looked at the crash data along the corridor. So between 2015 and 2019, there were approximately 114 crashes, with peak hour crashes occurring between 4 and 5 p.m. 25% of those crashes have resulted in an injury. And as you can see from the graph there, most of the crashes are related to rear-end collisions. Something else I just wanted to highlight is there have been 4 crashes that involve bicyclists and 1 that involved the pedestrian. These are the types of data that we look at, you know, especially when considering future design scenarios for the corridor. We've also looked at some of the intersections throughout the corridor. There are various intersections, but for the purpose of our discussion tonight, we're just going to focus on the three main intersections. So you have two signalized intersections at US 1 and the other at Walton. Both have dedicated turning lanes, wide curb radii, high visibility crosswalks. US 1 does have pedestrian refuge islands, making it a little bit more convenient for pedestrians to walk. And then Walton Road has those wide turning radius and is a collision hotspot when you look at the data. Southeast Tiffany Avenue is an unsignalized intersection with a dedicated left turning lane. There are no pedestrian crossings, and it does have wide curb radii. So these are some of the things that we're looking at. Our traffic engineers will be analyzing the data and coming up with some solutions or recommendations for improvements along these sections. Moving on to pedestrian conditions, so we found that there are various missing links along Village Green Drive, especially on the northern portion once you're north of Walton Road. There are long distances between crosswalks, so this meaning that pedestrians are more likely to cross at where there isn't a crossing, having a potential conflict with a pedestrian and a vehicle. There are lack of street trees and landscaping, so if you're walking on the existing sidewalks on a hot summer day, there is no refuge from the sun. There also lacks pedestrian lighting, and there is some lighting along the corridor, but that's mostly north of Walton Road. I do understand that the city is looking at adding pedestrian lighting in another project. There are also missing crosswalks at Southeast Tiffany Avenue, as I mentioned before. And then a lack of curb extensions or pedestrian refuge island on Walton Road. It is a long walk, as you can see from the picture on the bottom right there. So at times it can be uncomfortable and potentially conflicts for pedestrians. When we looked at the bicycle conditions, we found that there are no bicycle facilities on Village Green Drive, but there are bicyclists utilizing the corridor. So we saw bicyclists mostly riding along sidewalks and a few utilizing the roadway. There is a bike share station at the event center and a 12-foot shared use path on Walton Road. This graphic that you see on the screen here is from the Federal Highway Administration, which has a number of publications related to bicycle facilities. And we understand that most of the population, over 50%, feel comfortable using some type of separated facility, whether it's a shared use path, a side path, or a separated bike lane. While 5 to maybe 10% of the population is comfortable using a buffered bike lane, so a bicycle lane adjacent to traffic with maybe a 3-foot buffer, or a bike lane dedicated on the roadway, but right next to moving traffic. And even less number of the population is comfortable using a shoulder or a shared use lane. Unfortunately, many of the bicycle facilities throughout the state have been designed in these two manners, and we hope to look at creating something that will be used by most of the population, as you can see in the graphic, something that's separated. In terms of transit, Village Green Drive is serviced by Route 4, the Port St. Lucie trolley, with 1-hour service. There is 2 existing stops on Village Green Drive, right across from Midport Condominium Community. And this transit service is only provided between Tiffany Avenue and Walton Road. As you can see in the picture, you have seating and signage, but there is no way for ADA access. So if somebody in a wheelchair needed to utilize this bus stop, they would have to essentially wait on the roadway. And therefore there's limited connection to the bus stop. The Route 4 ends at City Center, so patrons utilizing Route 4 can potentially transfer over to Route 1, which services US 1. Future plans do show the possible transit stop to be located north of Walton Road, along Village Green Drive for future service along the Crosstown Parkway. So Village Green Drive has three distinct segments. You've got the northern gateway, what we've identified as the northern gateway, segment 1, which is highlighted in purple. This is between US 1 and Industrial Boulevard. And then segment 2, which we're calling the trail connection between Industrial Boulevard and Walton Road. And then finally, the last segment highlighted in blue is between Walton Road and Tiffany Avenue, which we're calling Recreational Way. So the first segment, the northern gateway, is surrounded by mostly industrial uses with some commercial and residential uses. There are few trees in the median and fronting buildings. Buildings are set back with parking in the front. The right-of-way is approximately 100 feet. There are 4 travel lanes, 2 in each direction, separated by a center line median. In terms of multimodal access, there are very limited sidewalks, mostly at the beginning of Village Green Drive near US 1, and then the remainder of the corridor there doesn't have any sidewalks. There are no bicycle facilities, and there are no transit stops. Average daily traffic for this segment is approximately 12,000 vehicles. Our next segment, segment 2, which we've called the Trails Connection, has some industrial uses, there's residential communities, and some institutional uses. So this is where the fire station is. Again, there are a few trees in the median and fronting buildings. Buildings are set back with parking in the front. There's a sidewalk missing on the west side, but you do have a sidewalk on the east side. It's a 5-foot concrete sidewalk that connects from the Spanish Lakes community down to Walton Road. And this is where there's also a canal and a hog pen slough. The right-of-way here is approximately 150 feet. There are 4 travel lanes, 2 in each direction, separated by a 20-foot median. No bicycle or transit access along this portion of the corridor. Traffic volumes are approximately 11,000 vehicles a day here. And then finally, a third segment, which we've identified as Recreational Way. This is where you have city center, some commercial uses, institutional uses, residential, medical, and recreation. Along the drive, it's mostly landscaping, retention ponds, trails, and residential entries. The right-of-way here is approximately 150 feet. There are 2 travel lanes, 1 in each direction. Sidewalks on both sides. So on the west side, you have a 5-foot concrete sidewalk, and then on the east side, you have a 6 to 7-foot asphalt sidewalk. There are no bicycle facilities along this segment, and there are 2 transit stops. Traffic along this portion of the corridor is approximately 4,000 vehicles a day. And next, I'm going to hand it over to Dan to talk about our corridor opportunities. Dan?
Thank you, Christina, and thank you, citizens of Port St. Lucie and our team. I feel like I get to talk about the fun stuff because we're talking about what the opportunities are for the corridor. And what we've tried to do is put together some images of the to expand your vision of what this corridor may look like, and to really generate some thought as far as what you envision this corridor looking like in your community. So if we could go to the first slide, one of the pedestrian improvements that we wanted to show you is dedicated specifically to pedestrians. So on the top left, you'll see a elevated pathway that you could use to transport pedestrians across a roadway so that there is that conflict avoided. Those are set on piers. The next slide, or the next image over, would be what you typically see in a suburban environment with a widened multi-use trail. So that trail would need to be probably 8 to 10 feet so that you could have comfortably walkers and bicyclers and different users on that path. We try to avoid mid-block crosswalks, but when you do have them, it's better to celebrate them and make them a little bit wider so that they are recognized as a pedestrian transportation system across a main road. So on that top right slide, you'll see with the different pavement patterns and bollards and other elements, it does celebrate a mid-block crossing. And then whenever you're thinking about pedestrians, you always have to take into account ADA. So those ADA accessible pathways need to be at grade with a minimum 2% slope. So when you're thinking about engineering design, that needs to be accounted for. And then the bottom right, the shared use, multi-use path, you can see the many people using that pathway. You've got cyclists, strollers, rollerbladers. I think people still rollerblade, right? And all the different kinds of users. So you need a really wide path when you have that kind of condition incorporated into a roadway. And then on the bottom right image, you'll see that it's a buffered pedestrian sidewalk. Pedestrians feel safer when there's landscaping on both sides of the sidewalk. Helps them feel a little bit more secure and isolated.
So that takes us to poll number 4. What types of pedestrian improvements would you like to see? You can select all that apply. Raised pedestrian bridge or walkway, wider sidewalks, protected or buffered sidewalks, additional mid-block crossings, enhanced crosswalks, shade trees, pedestrian amenities such as seating, trash bins, signage, workout stations, or lighting. We'll give you another 5 seconds to just wrap up this poll. And it looks like 75% would like the pedestrian amenities, lighting, and wider sidewalks. And then 63% shade trees, 38% for additional mid-block crossings and enhanced crosswalks, and 25% raised pedestrian bridge or walkway. And that's the end of that poll.
This next slide is specifically dedicated to bicycle improvements, and we know that there's a lot of cyclists in Port St. Lucie, a lot that live right around Village Green Drive. So we wanted to have this slide to show some love for the cyclists. And the first top image on the left is where you have a protected bicycle lane, and you can see the green marking, which is clearly delineating the cyclist separated from the sidewalk to the right, so that they have an unobstructed pathway free of any slower walkers or strollers, so that they can really use that to commute and to get to work out. In the middle image on top, that's your dedicated bicycle lane, which is shared roadway. Now, on this image, it's important to make your bicycle lane a little bit wider because you have car doors that can open, which can provide a hazard for some of the cyclists traveling along that same corridor. On the top right is another shared use and multi-use trail. You can see the width of that pathway is around 12 feet, so you have someone walking their dog, a bicyclist, and a walker, all side by side pretty much, so you can accommodate those 3 different user groups. Then in the bottom left, similar to the slide we looked at previously, the cyclist is separated from the vehicles by a raised planter with landscaping in it, so really it minimizes a lot of conflicts between those 2 uses. And then in a more suburban type condition, you've got the bicyclists that are out on a family stroll, and it's separated from vehicles. But then in an urban condition on the bottom right, where you have a similar shared or similar dedicated bike lane, those can coexist. And that would be similar to in this project where you may want to have along the warehouse area, which is a little bit more dense and urban.
And that takes us to our next poll. What type of bicycle facility would you prefer? You can only choose one. Protected bicycle lane, bicycle lanes, shared use path or multi-use trail, buffered bicycle lane, or separated bicycle lane. Looks like we're good. And 71% would like a shared use path or multi-use trail, with the rest a separated bicycle lane at 29%.
Thank you. When we begin to look at Port St. Lucie and developing a community identity or branding strategy or something that creates memories, I think any new project has an opportunity to do that, especially a master plan such as Village Green Drive and its close proximity to city center. We put together this slide to show what some of the possibilities are for the corridor and for the city. When you begin to take these elements together, they can really begin to create some character and a memorable experience. And they can range. They can range anywhere from public art to different pavement treatments with art sculptures. You can even see in the image in the top of the center where they use some monumentation with some solar panels on top, so those are providing kind of a dual benefit. Wayfinding signage is also important, and just many different types of things that you can do in a corridor or along a corridor to make it memorable. You can probably think of examples in your own travels and geography to where you remember a specific place because you remember a specific icon or a specific community feature that is memorable. So that's one of the opportunities for this corridor. And I think there's one more slide, Christina, which really talks about kind of the functional aspect of community improvements. And these are really trying to balance a functional and both aesthetic standpoint. So the mid-block crossings, when you have to do them, it's great to kind of increase their size, accentuate them with different plantings and other pavement materials, as you see on the top left with a shared pathway. Also, what's important is when you look at bollards, when you look at trash cans, when you look at lights, all of those elements can be unified and tied together to create a streetscape that is synonymous with what you're trying to achieve. So even the site furniture and all of those elements can be branded for a particular style that you need. Maybe you can imagine a seaside community where all the walkways would be coquina, and they would have coquina lamp poles and bollard fixtures, and that would be particular to a geographic area. I don't know that we've looked at that here in Port St. Lucie, but I do think that it's important when you're using and trying to create a sense of place that you look at local materials, look at using materials that really resemble the type of look that you're trying to do. Like when you go out west in Arizona and there's a lot of rock and desert areas, probably wouldn't be a good fit in a more coastal type environment. But those are some things to use. And then looking at some of these other examples, there's lots of opportunities with just even choosing your paver stone and your landscaping to create kind of this sense of place.
And that takes us to our next poll. What type of community improvements would you like to see? You can select all that you like. Gateway feature, monument sign, wayfinding signage, street furniture, enhanced vegetated median, linear park, or public art. We'll give it just a few more seconds. And it's like a tie between street furniture and enhanced vegetated medium at 57%, wayfinding signage and public art at 43%, linear park at 29%, and gateway feature at 14%. Dan?
Landscaping along roadways is very important. More motorists travel roadways than they do behind a gated community or behind a residential community or something like that. So landscapes along roadways need to be designed very well because it's important from an aesthetic standpoint, but also a practical standpoint, and it does showcase the community. And what we have shown here on this slide is a few different types of landscape that could be used along the corridor. The first image is more of your native landscape with the live oak and the sable palms, more of an old Florida type look, which can be done really well, especially when the live oaks get very large and they provide shade. The center image shows more of a landscape that's kind of in between a tropical and a natural landscape. But what I'd like to point out on this slide is that the sidewalk is buffered. So even the little landscape bed in between the edge of the roadway and the sidewalk does help provide some screening and some safety for the pedestrians on the sidewalk. The top right image is what you would see in a HOA type community where you have some monumentation that's enhanced with landscaping, with the tall Sylvester and medjool palms. Really does begin to provide some formality and some regalness to a community. And then we're blessed here on the Treasure Coast. We can use royal palms on the bottom image to the left. You may recall driving down Royal Palm Way and going over to the island of Palm Beach where they have those alley of royal palms, and they can make a very nice statement, and all of these grow well here in the Treasure Coast. You know, one of the good things is we can use color here. We do have the ability to have tropical landscapes, so adding splashes of color with the native evergreen vegetation and some of the palms is a nice look. And I think the next slide, Christina, talks about really a condition to where landscaping can be used for a functional aspect as well. As Christina mentioned earlier, there is a portion of this roadway for Hogpen Slough that with the right treatment can be cleaned up and really used as a benefit both from an environmental and an aesthetic standpoint. You may know of the little creek in San Antonio that was cleaned up and really became something special for that community. But on the top left, you can see how the vegetated swale and the native grasses is used in that application. You know, using these types of vegetation is good to clean up the water. It helps remove the pollutants from stormwater runoff before it gets into the natural drainage system, and provides better, best management practices. And also it's can be a great alternative to piping and the costs associated with a more engineered approach to drainage. So I think that, you know, it is something to consider. It does need to be maintained so that it functions correctly. But these slides begin to talk about some of those conditions.
And that takes us to our next poll. What type of landscape improvements would you like to see? You can select all that you like. Bioswales, median enhancements, shade trees, ornamental landscaping, wildflowers, or xeriscape, which reduces or eliminates the need for irrigation. Okay, it looks like we have our results in. And it's a three-way tie at 67% for median enhancements, shade trees, and ornamental landscaping. And then 56% wildflowers, xeriscape, 33%, and bioswales at 22%.
Traffic calming is important on a corridor like this. The top left slide shows well delineated paver pathways for pedestrians when they're crossing a busy intersection. And I think that's important to also have landscaping on the bulb outs, because what it does is it provides a distinction between vehicular traffic and pedestrian traffic, and that's an example of one of those. In the center island on the top, in this particular application, a center island median or a chicane was used to help slow traffic down in this speeding portion of the roadway. And it's probably not applicable along all of Village Green Drive, but in this particular location on this slide, chicane is where it's a slight bend in the road with a landscaped island in the middle to help motorists slow down and pay attention to the medians before progressing on in their route of travel. On the bottom left is a roundabout, whereas the top two were used to slow cars down. Roundabouts are actually used to speed traffic up instead of coming to a four-way stop. A roundabout is put in so that it has continuous flow around that intersection. And these, I know here in the city, we enjoy putting public art in some of the roundabouts, as well as landscaping. One of the important things is that your lights do not shine across the roundabout, so landscaping can help mitigate some of those concerns at night. The bottom middle slide shows a pedestrian connection across a vehicular road, and what this does is the boulders and the different paver colors and patterns help the motorists know that something special is happening at this intersection, so to slow down and to be aware. And then in the bottom right, we do have the ADA condition, which needs to be met whenever you have a tabletop or a crosswalk. So this is your typical tabletop, which is used to also slow traffic down and provide for a pedestrian connection.
The next poll is, what type of traffic calming techniques would you like to see? Select all that apply. Curb extensions, chicane, center island median, roundabouts, speed humps, textured pavement, raised pedestrian crossing, or parallel parking. Okay, looks like we're just going to wrap it up. And roundabouts came in first at 63%, center island median at 50%, textured pavement at 25%, and then curb extensions, chicane, and parallel parking all at 13%.
So in terms of transit improvements, we're looking at various types of amenities. You have your basic transit amenities, which typically include shelter, seating, trash recycling bins, a bicycle lock, and signage. And so on the slide here, you can see the various types of different amenities that could also be offered at a transit stop. So the first picture is your basic transit amenities that are typically included mostly at high-use transit stops, but ideally we'd like to see these types of treatments applied even at low-use transit stops, so folks aren't waiting in the hot sun or not having a place to sit when they're waiting for transit. You could also include public art at transit stops, whether as part of the shelter or a standalone piece. Charging stations, as everybody nowadays carries a mobile device. Mobility share, so something like a bike share station nearby, so allowing people to potentially rent a bicycle, once they get off the bus to travel to another place. And then, of course, real-time signage, where you're given information in real time as to when the next bus will come. And this will segue into our next poll.
What type of transit amenities would you prefer? Again, you can select all that apply. Shelters, trash and recycling bins, signage, improved access, public art, charging stations, real-time information, improved frequency, or shared mobility services, like bike shares. Okay, just a few more seconds. And it looks like trash and recycling bins is 88%, with shelters at 75%. Signage, improved access, public art, and real-time information, as well as improved frequency at 25%. And then charging station and shared mobility services at 13%. Christina?
Thank you, Melissa. It's some great feedback we're getting here. So our next slide is about intersection improvements and looking at the different types of improvements we can apply. So that first image on the top left is about signal timing. So ensuring, that the timing of signals is allowing traffic to move free flowing and stopping all at the same time to allow the contraflow. But also improving signal timing for pedestrians and bicyclists crossing. There's also applying pedestrian and bicycle signals. So a lot of our crossings have pedestrian signals, but maybe adding a bicycle signal or a sign that says bicyclists use pedestrian signals. And then there's also the idea of bus signal priority, allowing buses to cross the intersection first, which reduces travel times and delays for transit riders and makes transit more attractive. And then also adding items like audible push buttons for our ADA users that may not be able to see, so that they're, have a audio about when to walk or cross the street. And then, of course, you have your improved pedestrian bicycle crossings, that bottom right picture showing a high-emphasis crosswalk. It's nice and wide so that you can safely cross the street, and it also allows for bicyclists to cross as well. And that leads us to our next and final poll. Melissa?
Yes, what type of intersection improvements would you like to see? You can select all that apply. Improved signal timing for vehicles, improved signal timing for pedestrian and bicyclists, bicycle signal, signal priority for pedestrian and/or bicyclist, signal priority for transit, or improved or enhanced crossings for pedestrians and bicyclists. Okay, we're going to pull up the results now. So improved signal timing for vehicles was 88%. Improved signal timing for pedestrian and bicyclists at 63%. Signal priority for pedestrian and/or bicyclist and improved or enhanced crossings for pedestrian and bicyclists both came in at 50%. And then finally, bicycle signal with 13%.
Great, we've gotten some great information and feedback this evening. I'm gonna go ahead and wrap it up here with the discussion on our next steps. So as I mentioned previously, task 1 will be ongoing throughout our process. We're wrapping up task 2, which will then move into task 3, which will come up with some conceptual designs. Our goal is to, in the next meeting in February, present to you 3 alternative design concepts, and you'll be given the opportunity to provide us feedback, comments, and as well as vote on your preferred design alternative. And then from there, we'll take the comments and feedback, fine-tune the designs, and then come up with a 15% design plan for the preferred alternative to present to the City Council we're looking at May or June of next year. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Jennifer to talk about future meetings. Jennifer?
Thank you, Christina. The next slide shows a few upcoming events that we have. We do have an additional public meeting scheduled on this activity. It is for February 18th, that's 2021. If you visit the Village Green website, within the city's website, you will be able to keep up on the information related to this project. You can actually register to stay in contact on any updates. The second activity I wanted to point out is the city is pursuing a small area plan related to City Center. And for those of you that are familiar with this area, you know that City Center sits adjacent to Village Green Drive. So it's one of the activities we're looking at future development of that particular parcel or parcels, and that we will have a public meeting on that event on October 29th. And there also is a survey that you can take for that project on the city's website, on the City Center page. But we just wanted to clarify that there are two activities, very distinct activities that are occurring about the same time. We wanted to make you aware of both of those activities. It is 2021. Thank you. So that does bring us to the end of our presentation. At this time, we will be able to answer any questions or address any comments that come in. I did want to take a moment to acknowledge Mary Ann, who lives in Spanish Lakes and did provide an email to me earlier today regarding her comments on this project. So we are welcoming comments either this evening, but also into the future by way of our website. My information is on the screen right now, I believe. As well as Christina's, so you can reach both of us, but our information is on the city's website as well. And we'll pause for just a moment so we connect with our communications team and make sure we have everything covered. Okay, I believe we have everything addressed tonight. Again, we thank you for joining us for this first public information meeting related to the Village Green Drive Corridor Revitalization Project. Again, welcome you to reach out to us anytime after this evening if you'd like to provide additional information. I'd like to thank our project partners here with Marlin Engineering, with Cutler and Herring, and with Firefly for being team members on this project. Thank you.